And there you see the pictures. A wheelchair-bound Canadian man savagely beaten while he traveled through Australia. Security cameras at a Sydney train station caught the events as they unfolded, and as you see in the footage, the man is confronted and attacked. The beating lasted nearly 5 minutes. The two suspects even used a metal bar from the man's wheelchair.
He's been through a lot in his life, and he doesn't deserve what's happened again. Sick to my stomach. You know, he came out here for me and he's ended up in hospital.
That's the man's girlfriend speaking publicly. He was taken to hospital. He's had emergency surgery on his head. His condition has since stabilized. More on the story now as we begin with Tim Stackpole. He's a freelance reporter in Sydney who's been covering the story and joins us now via webcam. And Tim, I gave some of the highlights there, some of the main points to this story that we're just learning of today. Take me through any other details that you've been covering that I didn't mention there.
Yes, well, Heather, we know that the Canadian man is from Manitoba. He's out here on a tourist visa for 1 year, visiting his girlfriend, as you say, wheelchair-bound, though. And Australia is absolutely disgusted at the news as we heard it today. And, in fact, the news is still unfolding as we speak. We'll get an update on that from the police in just a moment. But the man himself was attacked repeatedly. This 16-year-old youth that you see in that video, that dramatic video, came back again and again and attacked this man, even with parts of his own wheelchair. Now, as I say, the community here is outraged. This Sydney is a little way from the coast. Perhaps the crime rate is a little bit higher than we'd like to see in Sydney in that suburb, but to be honest, no one would have expected a man in a wheelchair to be attacked at a railway station in this city, Heather. No,
and maybe a little bit more on the reaction, if you would. As these pictures have become public, the closed-circuit television images, what have people been saying?
Who can believe it? Who can believe it? In fact, the community, the people who live in the area of Mount Druitt will say this was destined to happen. The crime rate there has been going up and up and up. The police have been doing their utmost to keep it under control. But this is a place in Sydney where perhaps there is not a lot for the youth of the streets to be able to do. So perhaps that is one reason why the crime rate is going up and up and up in that part of Sydney. But the community reaction, Heather, as you could well believe and understand, people are just shocked. People cannot believe that this happened, let alone the severity of the attack that you can see in those closed-circuit television pictures. It is truly unbelievable for us here.
And for here, too, as we're learning of it this morning. Tim, I thank you very much for your coverage as we begin this morning. Tim Stackpole via webcam from Sydney, Australia. More on the story now with Joanne Elliott. Now, Joanne is a spokesperson for the New South Wales Police Force, which is now investigating. Ms. Elliott, good morning to you.
Good morning, Heather.
Thank you very much for your time today. We've covered the facts, basically, of what we know so far on this story. Can I begin with the Canadian man, though, at the center of it? At this hour, what can you tell us about his condition?
Look, I do believe that his condition has stabilised throughout the day. He did suffer very serious head injuries in this horrible assault, but I understand he was taken to a district hospital and then was transferred to one of our larger hospitals in Sydney's western suburbs at Westmead. And as I say, I do believe that his condition has stabilised today.
You called it a horrible assault. Some of your other police colleagues have called it a calculated assault, one of the most serious attacks I've seen. Can you just characterize it a little more for us this morning?
Well, look, certainly I've worked, I'm a civilian, but I've worked for New South Wales Police for 10 years. I've never heard of an assault like this ever in any of this time. And I know that very, very experienced police who have worked in Sydney's western suburbs for, 20 years, again, they were absolutely appalled by what happened. The vision, as you're no doubt showing, is appalling, and we actually were required to edit the vision because the worst of it was quite truly horrific, I'm told.
Really? So the pictures that we're seeing are the best of this terrible situation here?
Yes, relatively what we felt would be able to be showed on TV, basically, which should be the same as you, I'm sure, prime time between 6 and 7 at night. But I guess the good news is, Heather, is that we have had a 16-year-old youth appear in court today. He was charged with multiple offences over this assault. He's been charged with offences including causing grievous bodily harm with intent and robbery while armed with an offensive weapon. Now, he appeared in the Children's Court today. He was refused bail, which means obviously he is now remains in custody, and he's due to reappear in court again on the 8th of April.
And there is a second suspect for whom you are still looking this morning, I understand.
Well, we had put out an appeal, and that was the vision that we had of the second person in that white jumper with the dark cap, I'm sure you're seeing. The good news is, Heather, that shortly after 7 o'clock Sydney time, a young person did present themselves to the police station. I believe he was accompanied by his parents, and detectives have been interviewing that young person for the past couple of hours. We would hope there will be charges laid sometime in the next couple of hours, and so, very shortly, we should have an update on that.
And will they be similar charges to the other teenage suspect, the robbery and weapons charges?
Look, I would only be speculating, but, the allegations that have been made to this point certainly seem to indicate that.
Okay.
I don't have an age either on this child at this point in time, but, the mere fact of their ages is very disturbing too, Heather, I have to say.
Well, there are so many disturbing parts to this, obviously, but there's a charge of robbery in connection with the first suspects, and maybe that speaks to motive here, but the question after all of this is why? Why a man in a wheelchair? Why come back to keep attacking a man in a wheelchair? Do you have any sense of that?
Not at all. Not at all. As I say, it is appalling. It appears to be a totally random act, and there doesn't appear, as far as we can tell at this point in time from the investigators I've spoken to, that there doesn't appear to be any motive at this point either. I believe that the victim had actually been just seeing friends in a band at one of the local clubs, and had just gone to the railway station to travel home on the train afterwards.
So just a wrong place at the wrong time, it seems, at this point? Or I don't know if in appearing before the court, or if there were any comments made or anything from the first fellow who's now been charged as to what they might have said to him, or anything to whether words exchanged?
Unfortunately, the court system in Australia is that if they do not oppose bail, police do not have to present evidence. So if we oppose bail, obviously, because of the viciousness of the attack. So there was no brief of evidence presented at this point in time. We might hear a little bit more tomorrow when we anticipate this other person to go to court, and of course then again in coming weeks as the brief is prepared.
Okay. Ms. Elliott, I thank you so much for all of this morning, such valuable information as we process this story here in Canada, and I hope that you'll let us speak to you again as we look for more detail on this. Certainly tomorrow, from the sounds of it, perhaps even today as this evolves.
Yes, look, very happy to help again, and just terribly sad that this has happened because, as I say, it's never had a similar situation like this before.
Right. Thank you so much again for all of that.
Thanks, Heather.
Joanne Elliott joining us this morning from the police force now investigating the Canadian man, 35-year-old, who wishes to remain at this point unidentified, but a 35-year-old man in a wheelchair. As we look at these closed-circuit television images one more time, and as we heard from Joanne Elliott, they edited out the worst parts of this vicious attack. They attacked him once, came back again, beat him about the head, and in some cases with metal bars from his own wheelchair. We'll have more on this through the day.